One of the most dangerous lies in modern life is the idea that peace and weakness are the same thing. That if a man is calm, he must be passive. If he is patient, he must be soft. If he does not react to everything, he must be easy to dominate. But real calmness has nothing to do with helplessness. In fact, the most controlled people are often the most dangerous to underestimate. Not because they are cruel, and not because they are looking for conflict, but because they are not ruled by impulse. They do not collapse under pressure. They do not panic when challenged. They do not need to shout to prove they have strength. And that is exactly why so many people misread them. We live in a world that confuses noise with power. Aggression looks strong. Volume looks strong. Constant emotional display looks strong. But very often, all of that is just instability on full display. It is not power. It is poor self-control made visible. A calm man is different. He does not waste himself so easily. He watches, he measures, he chooses. He knows that the ability to stay composed in a hostile world is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that he has built an inner structure most people do not have. This is where many people go wrong. They think the goal is to be nice, agreeable, inoffensive, and harmless. They think goodness means making everyone around them comfortable. They think strength becomes dangerous the moment it stops apologizing for itself. But a man should not aim to be harmless. He should aim to be disciplined. There is a difference. A harmless man cannot defend himself. A disciplined man can, but does not need to prove it every moment. A harmless man avoids conflict because he fears it. A disciplined man remains calm because he has mastered himself. That is the difference between softness and restraint. So in this video, we are going to explore why calmness should never be confused with weakness, why harmlessness is not a virtue, and why the strongest people are often the ones who have learned how to carry power without putting it on display. Part 1. Why people confuse calmness with weakness. Most people judge strength by appearance. They look for the obvious signs: loudness, aggression, dominance, emotional intensity. The person who takes up the most space in a room is often assumed to be the strongest person in it. But that kind of thinking belongs to an immature mind, because the loudest person is often the least stable. The most reactive person is often the easiest to control. The one who constantly displays force usually does it because he is desperate for others to believe in it. Real strength is usually quieter than people expect. A man who has control over himself does not need to advertise it. He does not need to react to every insult, every challenge, every opinion, every provocation. He is not dependent on emotional display to feel real. He is not constantly proving his existence through reaction. That restraint is often misread as weakness by people who only understand force in its most primitive form. But primitive force is cheap. Any fool can lose his temper. Any fool can slam doors, raise his voice, and turn every minor conflict into a performance. None of that requires mastery. It only requires poor regulation. What actually requires strength is the ability to remain steady when pressure enters the room, to feel anger without becoming its servant, to feel tension without needing to discharge it immediately, to recognize provocation and still choose your response deliberately. That kind of calm is not passive, it is controlled force. And controlled force is always more serious than emotional chaos. Part 2. Harmlessness is not a moral ideal. A lot of people have been taught that being good means being non-threatening. Be easy, be agreeable. Be soft enough that nobody has to fear resistance from you. Be pleasant enough that everyone feels safe around you, even if they are the ones crossing lines. But that is not morality. That is social convenience. A harmless person may look virtuous on the surface, but harmlessness by itself says nothing about character. A rabbit is harmless. A weak man can be harmless. Someone with no courage, no backbone, and no ability to defend what matters can look harmless all day long. That does not make him good. It only means he lacks force. Virtue is not the absence of strength. Virtue is strength governed by principle. That is a much higher standard. A disciplined man may be capable of confrontation, but he does not seek it unnecessarily. He may be capable of severity, but he does not become cruel. He may be capable of walking away, saying no, defending himself, or cutting ties, but he does not do these things from vanity or emotional instability. He does them when reason requires it. That is moral seriousness, and it is far more valuable than harmlessness, because harmlessness often comes from fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of upsetting people, fear of losing affection, fear of being seen as hard, so people hide their strength to remain acceptable. They make themselves smaller. They soften their boundaries. They pretend not to notice disrespect. They tolerate what they should reject, all in the name of being kind. But a man who cannot defend his peace will not keep it. A man who cannot resist pressure will eventually serve whatever pressures him most. And a man who is proud of being harmless may one day realize he built his whole identity around avoiding discomfort. That is not virtue, that is surrender. Part 3 in the difference between restraint and weakness. This is where the distinction becomes important. Weakness and restraint can look similar from the outside, but they come from completely different inner conditions. A weak man stays silent because he is afraid to speak. A restrained man stays silent because speaking would lower him. A weak man avoids conflict because he cannot tolerate disapproval. A restrained man avoids unnecessary conflict because he sees no value in wasting energy. A weak man says yes because he fears rejection. A restrained man says no when necessary, and he does it without drama. The outer behavior may sometimes look the same. Silence can be silence. Calm can be calm. Withdrawal can be withdrawal. But the source matters. One comes from fear, the other comes from control. And your life will always be shaped by the source, not just the appearance. This is why many people spend years telling themselves they are peaceful, when in reality they are only passive. They call it maturity when they stay quiet, but the truth is they are frightened of consequences. They call it kindness when they over-accommodate, but underneath that kindness is anxiety. They call it patience, but it is often just avoidance. Stoicism forces you to be more honest than that. It asks whether your calm is chosen or whether it is simply the result of weakness. It asks whether your silence is dignified or fearful. It asks whether you truly have control over yourself or whether you have simply trained yourself to freeze. That is a brutal distinction, because once you see it clearly, you can no longer hide inside the image of being the good one. You have to build actual strength, and then you have to learn how not to misuse it. That is the work. Part 4. Why controlled men are often misread. The world often misreads controlled men because it does not know what it is looking at. A man who does not explain himself constantly is called cold. A man who does not react emotionally is called detached. A man who sets boundaries without anger is called arrogant. A man who does not chase approval is called distant. But many of these labels are just projections from people who are uncomfortable around inner stability. Because stability exposes chaos. A person who lives in constant reaction will feel unsettled around someone who does not react so easily. A person who needs endless reassurance will feel threatened by someone who is emotionally self-contained. A person who relies on guilt, pressure, or emotional confusion to influence others will always struggle with someone who stays clear under pressure. This is why composure can make weak people uncomfortable. They cannot easily read it. They cannot easily move it. They cannot easily infect it. And anything that cannot be easily manipulated starts to feel dangerous. That is the key point. A calm man is not dangerous because he is unstable. He is dangerous because he is hard to control. He is dangerous because he does not hand his nervous system to every passing situation. He is dangerous because you cannot bait him as easily, shame him as easily, or provoke him into acting against himself. That kind of man changes the entire atmosphere of a room without saying much. And people feel that, even when they do not understand it. Part 5. You should not want to be intimidating, but you should not be easy to violate. There is an important balance here. The goal is not to become threatening for the sake of image. The goal is not to cultivate some fake aura of danger. The goal is not to become a cold, hostile man who enjoys making others uncomfortable. That is not strength. That is insecurity in costume. The real goal is simpler and more serious. You should not be easy to violate. Your boundaries should mean something. Your words should mean something. Your silence should not be mistaken for permission. Your patience should not create the illusion that anything can be done to you without consequence. This requires presence, not loud presence, not theatrical presence, but real presence, the kind that comes from self-respect, from discipline, from clarity about what you will tolerate and what you will not. A man with no edge gets consumed by the world. People take more than they should. They test more than they should. They disrespect more than they should. And they do it because they sense there is no real cost. That is why harmlessness is such a poor standard. It invites erosion. A better standard is this: be peaceful, but make your peace expensive to disturb. That means you do not go looking for battles, but you are not incapable of resistance. You are not emotionally addicted to confrontation, but neither are you dependent on comfort. You know how to endure, but you also know how to end things when necessary. That is not cruelty. That is self-respect in action. Part 6. Stoicism is about mastering force, not erasing it. A lot of people imagine Stoicism as the removal of intensity, as if the Stoic becomes flat, passionless, emotionally distant, almost lifeless. A man who feels little, wants little, and responds to nothing. But real Stoicism is not about erasing force. It is about mastering it. The Stoic still feels anger, but he does not become possessed by it. He still feels fear, but he does not obey it blindly. He still experiences pain, disappointment, frustration, and insult, but he does not surrender his judgment to them. That is what makes Stoicism powerful. It does not weaken the man. It organizes him. It takes the chaotic impulses that normally control people and places them under discipline. It teaches a person how to endure discomfort without collapsing into reaction. It teaches him how to remain guided by reason when emotion is trying to take command. This is what so many people miss. They think the Stoic is soft because he is calm. But calmness can sit on top of enormous strength. In fact, it often does. The man who has nothing underneath his calm usually falls apart the moment real pressure appears. The man who has built inner force can remain composed even while taking decisive action. That is why calmness is so often misunderstood. People see the stillness, but they do not see the structure beneath it. They see the restraint, but they do not see the power being restrained. And what they fail to understand, they often underestimate. Part 7, Why the Strongest Men Often Look the Least Theatrical. There is something almost disappointing about real strength if you expect it to look dramatic. It is often simple. The strongest men are rarely the most theatrical. They do not constantly signal dominance. They do not turn every disagreement into a test of ego. They do not need to win every room. They do not need to be seen as dangerous every second. That is because they are no longer trapped in the performance of strength. They have moved beyond the need to appear powerful, and that is usually the clearest sign that power is actually there. A man who is secure in his force does not need to decorate it. He can remain measured. He can listen without shrinking. He can disagree without exploding. He can walk away without feeling humiliated. He can hold his ground without turning everything into a spectacle. This is rare because most people are ruled by image. They want to look fearless, look respected, look dominant, look unbothered. But appearance is fragile. The Stoic aims at something deeper. He wants to become stable enough that his actions do not depend on the emotional weather around him. He wants enough self-command that pressure does not instantly turn into performance. He wants enough discipline that his peace is not just softness and his strength is not just aggression. That creates a different kind of man. Not loud, not performative, not harmless, but grounded. And grounded men are hard to move. So no, you should not aim to be harmless. You should aim to be calm, disciplined, and difficult to shake. Harmlessness is not a virtue by itself. Very often it is only weakness that has never been tested. But calmness backed by strength is different. It means you are capable of force without being ruled by it. It means you can stay composed without becoming passive. It means your peace is real because it is protected by self-command. That is the standard. Not aggression, not softness, not performance, control. A man should not be looking for reasons to intimidate the world, but neither should he build a personality that invites constant disrespect, manipulation, or violation. He should be clear, steady, measured, capable of saying no, capable of enduring, capable of drawing a line and meaning it. Be peaceful if you can, but never confuse peace with helplessness. Be calm, not harmless.